the www.youtube.com/Billy Younger Physics Solutions. The B is capitalized in Billy, the Y is capitalized in Younger, the P is capitalized in Physics, and the first S is capitalized in Solutions. But anyway, this is another unit conversion problem. If you're not familiar with unit conversions, please look up my video called Unit Space Conversions. Then it ends with a colon and says multiplicative. If you just do a search for unit or maybe even unit conversions, you should find it. Anyways, that's the first video where I explain to you exactly how you convert units. But in short, when you have a number that you want to convert as opposed to change, then there's only a few arithmetic operations you can do on that number without changing its value. One of those arithmetic things is adding 0, which turns out not to be very helpful. But the other thing is multiplying by 1, which with a interesting use of our definition of the number 1, it can work out quite well, because remember 1 is 1, but it's also 1 over 1, because you can always put a number over 1. But as long as the numerator is equal to the denominator, then that's also 1. So we could say 1 foot over 12 inches, or we could say 12 inches over 1 foot, or we could say 1 liter over 1,000 milliliters, all sorts of stuff like that. So that's really the trick. And what we do is we choose a fraction such that the units we want remain and the units that we don't want get canceled out. Like your typical algebra problem where you have 4x squared y over 2xz, and you can cancel out some of the x's, and the 4 and the 2 for that matter. So anyways, let's start by showing you what the actual question is for this one. The question I'm doing is obviously multiple parts, but it is how big is a liter? How many cubic centimeters are in 1 liter? And I want to say how big is a liter. I'm asking you for the definition. So I'm going to actually give you the definition of what a liter is, and I'll even give you some physical representation of the size so you'll have some sense of how big it is. How many cubic centimeters are in 1 liter? How many liters are in 1 cubic meter? How many cubic inches is in 1? It should be inches are in 1 liter. And how many cubic yards? What dump truck drivers and landscapers often call a yard is in 1 cubic meter. And finally, how many cubic feet are in 1 yard? So that's what we're actually shooting for here. Let me stop sharing and give you a little intro to the liter. So the liter is defined to be a volume, specifically the volume of a perfect cube. And that perfect cube is a 10 centimeter cube. So that's literally 10 centimeters wide, about 10 centimeters long, about 10 centimeters deep. And of course, there's no firm definition on what is width, length, and height. But the main thing is you call it and stick with it. So this coaster, which you've probably seen 1,000 like it, little coasters made out of cork, this is exactly 10 centimeters in diameter. So if you're not that familiar with that, maybe you're more familiar, say, with the iPhone 13 Pro. So that gives you some idea of the relative sizes of them. 10 centimeters versus the iPhone Pro. You could also say 3.93 inches is really, really close to 10 centimeters. So 10 centimeters is really close to 4 inches. So a little bit smaller than 4 inches, but it's really close. So now that we have that under our belt, I can give you a little bit of practice in deriving and converting units. So also to give you a little perspective in terms of what a cubic centimeter and what a liter and all that stuff is, you've probably heard some of the modern day trucks riding around might have a 5.7 liter, might have a 5.0 liter, might have a 7.2 liter, and might have a 7.3 liter, that sort of thing. We'll discuss that a little bit. The Volkswagen Beetle in the, I think, 60s or 70s when that came out was actually equipped with a 1,300 cubic centimeter, what they call a CC engine, a 1,300 CC engine. I think the Super Beetle had a 1,600 CC. I once had a really nice truck. I miss it, but it was really bad on gas. I got about 8 to 9 miles a gallon. It was either 7.3 or 7.4 liter. I can't remember, but I know it was a 454 Chevy engine. So that 454 corresponds to cubic inches. So there's some real everyday life things that have to deal with actual volume and specifically liters and things like that. Now, for the record, basically in your engine, you have a cylinder, which is a open hole basically in your engine that's a cylindrical tube. And inside of that's a piston. And when the piston is all the way down, there's a huge empty volume over that piston, and it's cylindrical. Maybe it's cylindrical with a little hemicircle on top, in which case it's a Hemi engine. But either way, if you take the volume of that, all the airspace above the piston head, and then you push the piston all the way as far up as it's supposed to go and subtract the volume above the piston head there, that difference in volume is the volume that one cylinder has in it. And if you multiply that by the number of cylinders, since each cylinder is identical ideally, then you'll have the total liters or cubic centimeters or cubic inches of your car engine. So that's where that came from. So I've told you already, 1 liter is defined by the following: 1.0, and I'll put a 0 bar over the second one just because we're talking about exactly a liter. 1 liter is defined as the volume of a 10 centimeter cube. So in this case, we'd say a 10 centimeter cube might look like this, where that is 10 centimeters, 10 centimeters, and 10 centimeters, which of course is approximately 3.93 inches. Okay, so we can now see that the volume 1.00 liters is equal to 10 centimeters times 10 centimeters times 10 centimeters, which equals 1,000.0, because these are exact conversion factors. It's 1,000 cubic centimeters, which we also interchangeably use the phrase 1,000 cc's. So 1.00 liters is also equal to 1,000 cubic centimeters and 1,000 cc's. So that was the first part of our question. What exactly is a liter? And how many cubic centimeters are in 1 liter? Well, we see there's 1,000 cubic centimeters in 1 liter. And again, I put the bars over the zeros to mean that's for an infinite number of decimal places, because we're really using exact conversions here. Now we want to know how many liters are in 1 cubic meter. Well, that's going to be a little tricky. We're going to have to go from liters, or excuse me, we're going to have to go from cubic meters to cubic centimeters, and then from cubic centimeters to liters. And we'll do that now. So let's say 1 point, let's do not want red yet. We'll say 1.00 cubic meters. And I'm getting ready to do a conversion, and just because people aren't that gifted with fractions, sometimes it helps to put it over 1, so we'll know exactly where that 1 is. And what we do know is that there is 1.0 bar meters in 100.0 bar centimeters. But we have a meter, and then another meter, and then another meter that has to be converted. So I have to write this 3 times. That's the trick with volumes. Of course, you can simplify this when we do actual areas. It would be square centimeters or square meters. But the main thing is you got to know you got to do this every time. Now, obviously, you could also just write cubed, and that would be fine. Just be careful. Your calculator does know proper orders of operation. So it only takes and raises to a power the thing immediately to the left of the exponent. So unless you put parentheses in there, if you got multiple things to the left of the exponent, it's only going to count the one that's closest to it. So you got to be careful with that. This, on the other hand, converts us from, as you can see, this meter times this meter is meter squared times this meter is meter cubed. So now it cancels out with that, and I've got cubic centimeters. But what I really wanted was in liters. And now what I remember, since we just derived it above or converted it above, I do know that 1,000 cubic centimeters, which is what we have on the top, 1,000.0 cubic centimeters. That's the worst looking cube exponent I've ever done. I don't like it at all. Is equal to 1.0 with a bar over liters. And we don't have to cube that because in this case, you see the centimeters cubed right here. And this is centimeters times centimeters at centimeters squared times centimeters at centimeters cubed. So we're actually going to get liters. Now, with this long type of operation, I tell my students all you have to do really is just multiply all the numerators, get a new numerator, multiply all the denominators, get a new denominator, and then divide the new numerator by the new denominator, and you will have the right answer. So we can do that here, and I keep writing red equals. Obviously, 100 times 100 times 100 times 1 is 1 million. So I'm going to say 1.0 with a bar over it times 10 to the 6. And the only unit that exists on the top is the liter. And then I'm going to say 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1,000, which I'll write as 1.0 times 10 to the third. And that is no units. So we can see that 1.00 cubic meters is equal to 1,000,000 divided by 1,000. It's equal to 1,000.0 with a bar over it liters. So we now have a new relationship between liters and cubic meters. Obviously, a cubic meter is 1,000 liters. So when 1,000 1 liter Aquafina bottles, for instance, is the equivalent of 1 cubic meter. Also, if you've seen landscaping and house washing trucks riding around, they often have a flatbed trailer behind it, and they have this big sort of metal crate. It looks sort of like chain link fence, only the squares are really big, and they're squares instead of diamonds. Diamonds be like this, like a chain link fence, whereas this is big squares, maybe 6 or 7 inches tall, 6 or 7 inches wide. They're big galvanized metal, and inside of it is a pseudo clear white plastic container that fills it up and have water in it. That looks to me to be a little bit bigger than 1 yard by 1 yard by 1 yard. So I think it might actually be a cubic meter of water. Could be wrong. I haven't bought one. I haven't looked to search for one, but you will see those, and that'll give you a good estimate of what a cubic meter looks like. Later, when we learn about the density of water, we'll find out that a cubic meter of water actually weighs roughly 2,200 pounds, which is called a metric ton or a long ton. And whereas a 2,000 pounds flat is called a short ton, and that's the ton we use here in America. So that's another interesting little tidbit that could come in handy from time to time. So now I've done how many liters are in 1 cubic meter. Next, I want to know how many cubic inches are in 1 liter. I wrote is there for some reason instead of R. I wrote how many cubic inches is in 1 liter. That really should be how many cubic inches are in 1 liter. So let's do that. How many cubic inches? So what I do know is that 1.0 with a bar over it liter is equal to 1,000.0 with a bar over it cubic centimeters. And I happen to know a nice conversion between centimeters and inches. That's why I'm going with that one. I'm going to put it over 1 for the reasons previously discussed. I know that 2.54 centimeters, so I'll put a 0 after it with a bar over it, is exactly, because 2.54 centimeters is exactly 1.0 with a bar over it inches. Now, obviously the centimeters cubed, so I'm going to need to cube that too. So I'm just going to do that by cubing the whole thing, and I think you guys will all get that. So now this cubic centimeter cancels out with that cubic centimeter, and I'm left just with cubic inches. So I can see that 1.00 liter is in fact equal to basically I'm going to do 1,000 cubic inches. And then on the bottom, I'm going to do 1 times 2.54 times 2.54 times 2.54. And let's see what that is. 1 times 2.54. Now, actually, I'm not really writing 2.54 3 times. I'm just using the caret symbol on my calculator and hitting the 3 after it. And that says 16.387.064. And I'll put a 0 with a bar over it because I know that number is exact again. So now if I divide 1,000 by that number, then I should get the answer, and it turns out to be 61.02. Let's go ahead, 1 extra sig fig, 4 cubic inches. Now, this digit goes on for basically this number should be 61.0237744009, and that would be the whole number, and then it would be exactly correct. But since I'm rounding it, I'm going to put this little tilde over it to show that it's not approximate, not exactly right, it's approximate. So right above this, I'm going to write 1.0 bar liters is approximately equal to 61. Whoa, wrote that backwards. It's approximately equal to 61.024 cubic inches. Well, when I wrote a m there instead of, so now let's box it off. Now we can go back to my truck, which I said I couldn't remember was a 6.3 or 7.3 or 7.4 liter. I do know it was a 454. So if I take 454 cubic inches and I divide that by 61.024, I get 7.439. So yeah, my truck engine was a 7.4 liter. So I'll just put that as a little caveat in case anybody is curious, and I'll put it in red so no one, well, actually I'll put it in a different color altogether. I'm gonna put it in green. 454 cubic inches is approximately equal to 7.44 liters. So that's a whole different thing that'll help you. But anyways, it's just a nice little thing. You can always do that. So now that I've gotten that, I asked how many cubic inches are in 1 liter. And I've now, of course, changed that and found out that it's 61.024 roughly. Again, if I really wanted to say exactly what that number was, I would have to put up some more digits. So instead of the 2, 4, I would put 2, 3, 7, 4, 4, 0, 9. That's the rest of the digits, where this 2 corresponds with that and this corresponds to that. That's what it is to an infinite number of decimal places. So if I wanted to use a dot with a 0 after it, then that would be fine. And I just put, and this would be 1.0 bar liters is exactly equal to that. So just for the record, we have that as well. So I've done how big is a liter, I've done how many cubic centimeters are in 1 liter, I've done how many liters are in 1 cubic centimeter, and now I've done how many cubic inches are in 1 liter. Now I want to know how many cubic yards is in 1 meter, or excuse me, is in 1 cubic meter. So what I want to do is I want to start off with 1 cubic meter. Again, I'm saying exactly, so I'll put a bar of 0, and that'll be cubic meters. And I can go ahead and put that over 1 because I know I'm going to be working with fractions. And I know that, in fact, 1 meter, well, actually, let me stick with my rule, 1 meter, 0 with a bar over it, is equal to 100.0 centimeters with a bar over the 0, because, again, these are exact conversions. I can cube that. That'll give me exactly the correct conversion to any number of decimal places. So I've now 1 cubic meters gotten down to cubic centimeters. But then I want to work it ultimately to yards. So then I'll say, okay, well, I happen to know that there is exactly 2.540 with a bar over it centimeters in 1 inch, which I'll say 1.0 inch, because again, this is a exact conversion since roughly 1959. So I'll put a cube there. And now I'm looking at the units that have canceled out, or the cubic meter, and now the cubic centimeter have canceled out, and I'm up to cubic inches. But I also know there's 36 inches in a yard. So I'll now say times 36 inches, 1, and actually I should be consistent with this. I should say 36.0 inches is equal to 1.0 yards. Again, this is exactly, that's why I put the bars over it. And again, I got to cube it. So I'll put a cube there. So by writing it in cubes just saves me a lot of space on my paper. I haven't used from the top left to the bottom right, so I'll just do that with this one. So that gets rid of my inches cubed. Now again, I just multiply all the numerators times each other and get a new numerator. In this case, it's 1 times 100 times 100 times 100. That's 1.0 with a bar over it times 10 to the 6th. And the unit left is a cubic yard. Now the bottom's a lot messier. It's 1 times 1 times 2.54 times 2.54 times 2.54, and then times 36 times 36 times 36, and that gives me 764,554.858 with a 0 after it. No units whatsoever. So I can finally divide those two and find out that 1.00 with a bar over it cubic meters is equal to, and if I have too many digits, I'll have to make that a tilde to show that it's approximately equal to. And I'm going to get, when I do that division, I get 1.307. I'll go ahead and write all these digits. I don't know that this is all the digits, by the way, so I'm going to have to write it anyway. So I'll actually, no, I won't write all the digits. I'll just write 9, 5, 1. That's more than enough. And I'm going to say approximately because I'm actually rounding it here, and that's cubic yards. So quick and dirty, you just call it 1.31. 1 cubic meters, 1.31 yards or cubic yards. Technically, it should be called cubic yards, but it's certainly reasonable for people to save some time in the workforce. When I've worked with landscapers, truck drivers, construction workers, all that stuff, we often just call it a yard, and that's perfectly reasonable. Now, finally, I'm asking how many cubic feet are in 1 yard. So let's check that out. Let's see how many cubic feet are in 1 yard. Again, this is a yard in quotation marks. So I'm going to say 1.0 bar yard. We'll put quotation marks on that so we understand that's defined to be 1.0 yards cubed. Put that over 1, and we're wanting to convert that to cubic feet, and I happen to know that 1 yard is 3 feet. So I'm going to take 1.0 bar yard and equals 3.0. Again, it's exact, so I'll put a bar over it, and I'll put feet, and again, it's cubed, so I'm going to put this in cubed, and I don't know why I wrote this all in red, but anyways, no big deal. We clearly get 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 again is 27.0 with any number of bars after it, or any number of zeros after it, is 27.0 cubic feet. So what we have is a nice new result that 1.0 bar yards is defined to be 1.0 bar cubic yards, and that's equal to 27.0 cubic feet. So if you ever have a contractor come to your house to install some concrete, for instance, or to lay down some dirt, they're going to talk a lot about yards, and you're going to be measuring a lot of things in feet and inches. So it will help you to make some sense of what he's talking about if you remember that yard is meant to be cubic yards, and the weird math he's doing is probably converting some of that to inches, because usually the depth of a cement pad might be 6 or 8 inches. And obviously, 6 inches is a half foot, but they just like to keep it in inches, or 8 inches would be 2/3 of a foot, so on and so forth. So that's it. We've done the whole question. I've explained to you the definition of a liter. I've given you some conversions between the liter, and I even gave you some hints that, in fact, 1,000 kilograms is the mass of 1 cubic meter of water, and that 1 kilogram is approximately 2.2 pounds. It's not exactly 2.2. It's a little bit bigger, and that's called a metric ton, also called a ton, or called a long ton. And then in America, we use the short ton, which is 2,000 pounds as opposed to 2,200. And all that comes back from, again, the idea of the liter and the cubic meter. So I hope that helps. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing screen and end this video. Again, as always, look in my comments. You can request the actual documents that I've written up. In the comments, there'll always be some weird name right after the first line. It'll say, in this case, it'll say something like, how big is a yard? But in other cases, it'll say PHY 241, and then I'll have like a date stamped on the end, like 01212023. If you ask me, hey, I need the one for this particular number, this particular video, I can send you the actual document in a PDF form. So look me up. My email is billy@physicssolutions.com. Have a good day.